Hello there, welcome to episode 7 of This Is Lit, a podcast where we will be discussing all things literature. My name is Emily, and joining me today we have Prue Baker. How are you going, Prue?
I'm pretty good, Emily. I'm pretty snug in my new hoodie, non-fun, but
I'm also wearing mine.
It's an unofficial uniform of This Is Lit.
Yep.
Yeah, it's probably too warm to wear it, but you know what the hell.
I was literally thinking that before. Good outfit choice though. Very comfortable. If you don't own an hoodie or you don't know what one is, you should buy one.
Yeah.
We're not getting paid for sponsorship, but
no, definitely.
And we also have Sean Clark, who is not part of the Hoodie Club.
No,
but she's
I'm
here
not.
anyway.
Hello. I wish I had an Hoodie. You can donate me a Hoodie if you want. That would be great. I should definitely buy one though, so I can be part of the cool kids.
Yeah.
No. And that's where you guys go, no, Sean, don't be silly. You'll never be part of the cool kids.
Yeah, true. That would have been a better response.
I don't want to crush your dreams though, Sean.
True. My dreams of being a cool kid.
Anyway, so if you've been listening over the past few weeks, we've been talking about two of the English texts which we're teaching at the moment. The first one of those was The Longest Memory by Fred Dieguer, and the other one is a play called The 7 Stages of Grieving by Wesley Enoch and Deborah Melman. What we're up to today is doing a bit of comparison. So today's focus will be all about the themes within these two texts and how they're similar and different. But to start off with, just to give us a bit of an overview on structure, narrative style and all that sort of stuff, Prue's going to have a chat to us about that. And Sean.
All right. Well, I'll talk about the structure. So with The Longest Memory, the structure there is basically like this chain of voices. So this means that like each chapter builds on previous chapters with the new narrators, and the role of the storytelling gets passed around. So the whole story is being told by multiple characters, and each chapter reveals this kind of new perspective with their own kind of unique moral conflict that they're going through. And the result of this is that it creates this complex view of slavery and also this complex view of society of the Deep South or of Virginia during this time. Whereas, contrasting, 7 Stages of Grieving is a monodrama. I think we've talked about that before. Just quickly, yeah, Sean.
You should know it, that.
But I'll just quickly revise our access our prior knowledge. This means that it's performed by a single actor, and therefore there's only one character, and that's the woman. The structure of 7 Stages of Grieving is episodic, which places, so there's multiple, all the scenes, different kind of episodes, as you will, of these different kind of issues or experiences of Indigenous people. And this paints this complex picture of grief because the structure is non-linear. It jumps between past and present. It also bounces or shifts between the woman's story, so she has her own story, but then we also it also includes these real world events. So the scenes including the march or the Daniel Yock story. So unlike The Longest Memory, where we hear multiple perspectives through multiple characters, we only really hear from like an exclusively Indigenous point of view in 7 Stages of Grieving. Sorry, I've just lost my head then. So as I kind of said before, like these both texts are non-linear, so they jump between past and present, so that's something that's similar about them. The result or the effect of this emphasizes the confusion that can be felt when people are treated inconsistently and unpredictably. But I also think it helps the audience or reader really see cause and effect. So the effect of oppression or dispossession on people, even many, many, many years later. We see the importance of past events on present and even future events. So I think after reading or watching these texts, we're supposed to learn from the past. And I think that's the result, and that's the point of using this non-linear narrative structure. All right, that's it from me. Take it over, Sean.
Woo woo. All right, so guys, I'm going to make this super, super quick. So I am just looking at the narrative style slash literary devices, and I'm only going to talk about a couple of literary devices or device used by the authors of both Longest Memory and Seven Stages of Grieving really, really quick. So the narrative style, when we're looking at Longest Memory, obviously we have, in his characters, guys, I never say it right.
It's like
Somebody,
super interesting, right? Because I after we had this conversation, probably like back in our first episode, I looked it up because I'm like, oh, I want to know how to say it. And there's actually, I think there was just heaps of different YouTube videos, and it I think the pronunciation depended on what part of the world you were saying it from or something.
I say it. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm saying it phonetically because that's kind of like Diagua, like how it's spelt. Like,
Yeah,
so I'm
yeah.
just like, anyway, so I'll just keep using Diagua. What way did you say before?
Diagüe?
Diagüe.
I think I said
I don't know.
Diagüe, but I think I also mix it up.
Yeah.
Mix it up.
Okay. I'll just keep mixing it up.
Yeah. We need to hear from the author himself.
Yeah. So Diagüe uses obviously like memories. He uses diary entries. Chapel obviously uses poetry or verse, and then obviously we have a series of editorials from the Virginian editor in the text, The Longest Memory. When we're looking at Seven Stages of Grieving, however, we have to remember it's a play. So pretty much everything is presented with dialogue. Okay, so and very rarely. Do we see many other ways that these sorts of pieces of Aboriginal history and their story and tradition are presented in different ways, except for obviously the fact Daniel Yock's story, how it's presented in like a court report style delivered piece. And then obviously we have my favorite scene, which is I think it's called Murray Gets a Dress. And she delivers it in stand-up comedy. But yeah, it's really... Whoa. Are we okay?
I'm fine. That wasn't me.
Who was it? Oh my God, is Emily okay? I'm like, what? And so...
Oh, that was really weird. I muted myself because I needed to cough. And you still heard me.
Absolutely.
Ah, okay. Well, that's concerning.
That's concerning. I thought you were dying. Anyway,
No, sorry.
No, it's all good. And so it's really interesting because Seven Stages of Grieving uses a lot of dialogue with their language style and their literary devices. And so obviously this is words spoken by characters. But then Longest Memory, we've got Diagua, and it's delivered obviously with words. And so it's teaching us or instructing us about his moral message. So I just found that really, really interesting. Humor and stuff like that is also used a lot more in Seven Stages of Grieving. Very little humor and sarcasm, all that sort of stuff is delivered in The Longest Memory as well. So that was really interesting. That was one of the biggest things that I sort of kind of pulled out of them.
Do you think that's a process of healing, or because I think humor would be kind of out of place in The Longest Memory?
Absolutely, it would be out of place. I think obviously it is a process of grieving, but also being fortunate enough to sort of learn about how Indigenous students, Aboriginal students, learn through teachings of drama and stuff. They actually, when Indigenous people use humor and stuff. It's really interesting because that they really identify with using that kind of what word am I looking for here? Using that kind of
coping mechanism.
Yeah, coping mechanism to sort of deal with life. They're always kind of like jokers, and more so than I assume those presented in the story of The Longest Memory. Does that make sense? It's very interesting.
It is actually,
yeah.
I think though, if you looked at a modern day America, we would have those stand-up comics, joking in similar ways. Perhaps I'm not sure. It's just that we just don't see that in The Longest Memory, being a shorter time frame.
Yep, absolutely. And it's also, I could go into theatrical techniques and stuff like that the play has, but nobody cares. So
Correct. Sorry.
Let's move on. But yeah, so that's all I had.
Cool. Awesome.
Cool.
Well, moving on, we have our 3 focus questions for the week. Prue's question for the week is, what are some of the similarities and differences in these histories of racism or in their lingering, persistent legacies? So I thought this was a great question, Prue.
Thanks. I stole it. I'm gonna be honest. I'll be honest with you. It's not my question. I found it on the internet, but
Well, that
that's what it
makes
was.
sense. No. So
Whoa, I'm getting attacked. Why?
Jesus,
I
what?
have an hoodie.
Oh, true. Sorry. Yep. It was usually Sean that we gang up on.
Yeah, true.
forgot.
I enjoy this. Yes.
Anyway, so back to the actual question itself. I thought that a similarity between the 2 texts and like the histories of racism and like the legacies and everything is that like both of the oppressed groups have faced systemic racism. So like in both cases, like it's actually like built into their legal system and the way their like society functions and everything. So like the longest memory, obviously, like it was a business. We hear that referred to on like quite a few occasions. Like slaves themselves didn't have any rights. They're like there's all these references to them literally just being property. Like I always come back to the Virginian editor and the way he talks about them, especially when like he's talking about getting the best price for your investment and like separating families and all that sort of stuff because they're just like not seen as people, which is really awful. And then that I thought was like similar to the 7 stages of grieving, in the sense of like the stolen generation mainly. Like I know there's a lot of laws and stuff within our history in Australia where like Indigenous people weren't considered. Like there was laws. Oh, sorry, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There was like laws making them not responsible for themselves. Like the state got to decide like where they worked and where they lived and who they married and all that sort of stuff. But we don't actually hear so much about that in the text. The thing they do kind of draw upon more, I thought, was like the stolen generation in like Home Story and the invasion poem, where they talk about the children being removed. And yeah, it's like awful to think that actually went on for like 50 years. Like 50 years of taking kids away.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I thought that was quite similar to obviously what was experienced by slaves who didn't have their own rights and freedoms. But I think the difference between like the systemic racism within the 2 societies is like Indigenous people probably weren't exploited in the same sense that slaves were used in America. Like they weren't. I know it happened, but like again, if we just think about the text, like we don't really hear references to them being used as slave labor. But then like they obviously still weren't viewed as people, so that's a similarity.
Yeah.
What did you guys think?
I think I was similar. Sorry, Sean.
That's okay, you go.
I'm gonna cut in.
Is she there still?
Ooh, she gone? Yes, I win. Everything's going wrong this time, guys.
I know.
I'll just chat while we're waiting for Prue to come back, if that's okay. So one of the things that I noticed about that was different between the histories of racism and their, legacies and what they show is that I feel, and I don't know if this is just my feeling, like please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel the legacy within 7 stages of grieving of racism, I feel that that's more or less like more filled with grief and shown throughout the text because of that generational trauma. And I think it's because like our main character of, the Aboriginal woman, she's kind of like that face of like generational trauma. She's like young, all that sort of stuff. And so when we have Whitechapel, who's like the older man, he's pretty much dying, all that sort of stuff, I find that like those histories of racism and those stories that are told, like they're quite, in my mind, I don't know why, I feel like they're quite different between the 2 texts. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yep,
I'm
I
wrong.
agree. No, it
Yeah?
does. Sorry, I was just
Yeah, no, that's
distracted
okay.
because I was just messaging Prue to be like, "Hey, you're like,
You're
you
like
don't exist
gone.
anymore on the podcast. You're not part of this one."
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, I
Everything
do.
is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, oh god. Oh lord, we'll have to edit this all out. Nah.
Nah,
Kidding. Oh my god, is she back? Prue, you there?
nah.
Oh, I thought I just saw her come back on. Okay,
Nah.
never mind.
Um,
Yeah, but yeah, so I found that the histories of racism and all that sort of stuff, I found that much more, like, had a much more generational look from that point of history and that point of view in that younger sort of way. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
Prue, you back? I keep hearing the thing that shows that, like,
Yeah.
says that, yeah.
Me too.
Anyway.
Oh, wait, I'm back.
Oh, Prue,
good.
what happened?
What happened?
I
It
don't
just
know,
went
you just
super
went
silent. And I was like, does that make sense? And there was this radio silence. And then I was like, wait,
Did it
what?
remind you
Why
of
are
your
they
year
being
12
so quiet?
classes?
Yeah.
All of my classes, actually. I've had this problem and I was talking away and then I'm like, wait, can you hear me? Anyway, I don't even know. Continue where you guys are up to.
So I've answered the question brilliantly
Yeah.
in your absence, because you, like, as soon as you started talking, you cut out. So if you go,
Oh, what?
yeah.
Yeah.
How long were you talking for?
Probably like a minute. I don't even know.
Well, do it all
Oh my
again
god.
now.
This episode might require more editing than the others.
Like, maybe we'll see.
We'll see.
see.
We'll see. Go,
right.
go quick before you cut out again.
Oh my, yeah. Okay. I don't know where anyways. I think what I said was, and this is gonna be terrible now. What I said was that in these texts we don't see this one kind of bad guy or this evil or the enemy's face. It's mainstream societies that is the problem. So I think, like you were talking about, that systemic racism and how we see that or how that's perpetuated through the law, but we also see it perpetuated through just like the general beliefs and values or attitudes of people in that society.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the like Murray gets a dress, we see this kind of subtle covert racism, but obviously that's reflecting the kind of attitudes about Indigenous people. And yeah, I think also the Virginian editor kind of lends itself to that as well. Like, I think that chapter in The Longest Memory does also reflect the kind of common or typical attitudes, beliefs about that society. So not even just the law, but society would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably, all the other kind of white characters besides Lydia, they also reflect those common sort of attitudes and beliefs. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I think, like, I guess if you're talking about law and the systemic racism through law, we still see, like, I guess that's reflected in the 7 stages through, like, the police brutality and, like, the discrimination that Indigenous people face in the justice system.
Yeah, true.
And yeah, and how that's kind of setting them up to be
fail, I
unsuccessful.
suppose.
To fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, on to our next question. Hopefully we can only get better from here based on how well the first 15 minutes or so has gone of today's episode.
Oh god.
So this is my question. What ideas do both texts convey about the idea of memory? How are these depictions similar or different? Does anyone want to take this? Yeah?
I'll go before I cut out again.
Yeah.
It's my turn to cut out. Anyways, all right. So I think both of these texts show that memory and grief are burdens for the Black people that are in these texts. So grief and memory, I think, go hand in hand. The memory that these people have is of violence, of enslavement, or genocide. It's so this memory causes that significant grief or trauma. And then the idea that memory is, it's in the 7 stages, we see this kind of burden of memory through this like symbolism of the suitcase, and that she carries it around. I think we might have talked about that a few episodes ago. But the fact that
Yeah,
she
she's
has to
like,
carry,
yeah,
she
carrying
carries
all
this
that
around, she
grief.
unpacks it, packs it again, and there's probably more photos that she's putting in. She's locking that grief away, but like it's actual literal not luggage, baggage, that's the term, baggage that people carry around. And this is the baggage that she has to live with or carry around with her, is the trauma and the grief of her past and her family's past or her ancestors' past or even her people's past. Yeah. And I think memory in The Longest Memory is similar. So it's also really painful for him. He refuses to remember. He wants to forget everything. His memories are also full of trauma, full of violence. And, the fact that, he was ripped away from his home country. And so he spends the book trying to forget all these past painful memories.
I think it's interesting though, like a difference I just kind of thought of is like, so 7 stages of grieving, it's like grieving. No, hang on, what do I want to say here? Like, she's grieving for like, the culture and like what the generations before her have gone through as well. Whereas with The Longest Memory, would you say that like Whitechapel is more just concerned with like his own grief rather than the grief of like the rest of
Yeah.
his people? Hmm.
I never thought about that.
Would you say that, like, I guess, I don't know whether because he's from Africa, like then he doesn't consider, like, he's not considering the
Yeah, like,
he's the start, but
yeah, I
he's
guess
not
that
the
is the
start in
difference.
terms of the history, but like
Yeah.
he's the start in that intergenerational trauma. He's the beginning because
Mm.
it started with him getting taken away from
Yeah.
Africa. I don't know. I'm just
No, I think you're right. I think
Yeah.
because obviously like the woman, like she's speaking probably in like for the most part like in the 90s, we're guessing.
Yeah.
Which is obviously like after like a lot of this stuff has taken place. Whereas for Whitechapel, like he's literally been taken away from Africa. Like he's right there and like it's been, I don't know, it's interesting because it's like it's been going on for like 150 years, but like I guess he doesn't really reflect on that. It doesn't seem like he just I don't know.
Yeah. And none of the other characters do. Yeah. Something else I had in my notes was I guess he's the kind of beginning of it. He works to forget his past, and then because he wants to forget, the result of that is that he loses his connection to where he's from and his identity being African. But then he also, it's not just for himself. He also denies this to his descendants, his great granddaughter. So she's denied this connection because he wants to forget. Whereas I think in 7 stages, while
they passed it along.
Yeah, I think they acknowledge that memory is painful or it can be a burden, but they still see the importance of memory because memory is what, it's passing
Keeps it alive.
Yeah, 100%.
And it keeps them fighting and resisting the oppression. Whereas if Whitechapel's forgetting, he's becoming passive in his resistance to oppression. And that's not, I guess that's just different ways that people react to this.
Yeah, like it's not a criticism. It's just that, a difference in it.
But like it's just the different ways that people react to oppression. Yeah. Anyone else?
You pretty much summed it up. And this question here from Emily goes nicely into my question just about like the process of grief as well, though, which we've also briefly touched on. So yeah.
Yeah, so that being said, Sean's question, what do both texts display about the process of grief? How is this similar or different in each text?
So Prue summed it up really nicely before. I actually really like. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be a cop out here, but like, genuinely, she, the fact that Whitechapel wants to forget, he doesn't want to remember. Grief is very painful for him. He's something that he kind of just wants to put in a box and put it in a cupboard and just never look at it again. But then obviously in 7 Stages of Grieving, the Aboriginal woman, all of those characters come to life. And, they understand that although grieving is terrible and difficult and hard and what's happened to them is awful and, inhumane and all that jazz, it's something that's necessary to keep their history and their culture alive. So, yeah, I just found that really interesting. And it's really interesting as well because the other thing I wanted to talk about with this question was the fact that Whitechapel is the product of obviously all of that mistreatment and racism and prejudice and all that sort of stuff. And we can see that really painfully in the text, The Longest Memory. But it's really interesting because the process of grief is displayed differently with Seven Stages of Grieving. Like, I feel like we see more grief in Seven Stages of Grieving than we do in The Longest Memory, quite well. Like, we see like literally all the different stages, whereas with Whitechapel we pretty much just see like the last stage of grieving, which is basically him being basically accepting of his fate, but also wanting to obviously forget everything that's happened to him, which I found really interesting as well. What do you guys think?
You go, Em.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing really. Like, yeah, it's mainly that big difference of like how they deal with it. And I'd kind of like noted down that like the structure that you guys talked about also kind of supports like the whole idea of grief not being linear and that it's experienced differently by different people. And I think like looking at The Longest Memory too, like you can kind of like get a bit of a sense of that by the fact that like they've used those different perspectives and everything, and even the fact that like the narrative isn't told chronologically, it jumps around a little bit. So like I think that's trying to maybe like highlight, that it's different for everyone, and that everyone will like perceive and react to like the same situation in a different way.
Yeah, I think as well what's explored in both texts is that this like that grief is passed down through the generations and that we like hold on to this grief, and that's really only reflected in, I guess it's really only reflected in the character of the great granddaughter / great grandmother in The Longest Memory, because she was the one trying to talk to or connect with Whitechapel about his past, but it seems like in her chapter she's still kind of reflecting about it as a great grandmother. So she's been holding on to this I'm going to say trauma, this grief and trauma. Gruel. And so yeah, I think, and that's obviously as well that's obviously shown in the Seven Stages that grief is passed down. She's still experiencing grief through, multiple the generations that came before her.
Very interesting.
I think Whitechapel's character also shows that grief consumes us.
Yeah.
So his grief is like physically etched onto his face, and they called him like the worry lines or something, and they called him sad face.
Yeah.
So just, I guess, and that links back to your thing, Em. It's like just the different ways that people grieve.
And I guess you could also say from that like grief can consume you as well.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So interesting. Nice.
It is.
It's all wrapped up in a neat little package.
I'll put in a nice little suitcase.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Sorry. All right. Well, that brings us to our final segment for today, which I'm going to be hosting, and it is called True or False. So basically, I will be saying a few different statements about the texts, and Shan and Prue are going to have to tell me if it's true or false and to justify their opinion. So, like, there's only 3 that I'm going to go through, and, like, they could be either. You just have to actually justify, what you think.
Okay.
Okay. Wait. $1 million question. What do we win?
You win my approval.
Oh my God, that is all I want for like the last 3 years. Oh my God, the stakes are high. Okay, I'm ready.
Yep. Okay. No pressure, guys. All right. So, statement number 1: true or false? Both texts show that memories can bring us joy as well as pain.
True.
Why?
I just want to say, are we doing like names? Like, are we like buzzing in with our names? Like, what's happening?
Like, sure, okay, if you want. Sorry.
Prue, true. I was. If you're going to pull that card, I was going to be like, but I did say Prue.
Sorry, go.
Okay.
Go with your incorrect answer. Yep.
All right, let me try. I feel like my brain's fried. So it's true because we see the joy. Do you say memory brings us joy? Yeah, I think we see the joy in 7 stages through her connection with her family and connection to her culture. And I think
Can you give me an example?
I think in Nana, even though it's like, the Nana had died, I think that there's I think there's the whole family gets together, huge barbecues, bowls of salad. I feel like this is kind of like the sound of country music mixing with the clack of knives. I don't know. It seems like this kind of like the wake for her Nana seems like, a time where everyone's got together and.
Well, that's what wakes us kind of supposed to be, almost like celebrations of life.
Yeah, what about this? Sometimes you felt like crying, and sometimes the joy of being there was enough to forget, even for the briefest moment, the reason. Is that a good quote?
Good.
That's a good quote. Yep. I like it.
All right. The joy of memory the joy of memory, this might not be right, in The Longest Memory is the fact, I think, that Chapel and Lydia, their whole relationship was built on memorizing words for each other, and that's what brought their relation, strengthened their relationship. So they were reliant on memory, and I think their love and their relationship brought them some sort of joy, even though it would be painful.
I hadn't thought of it like that.
I just thought of that then.
Good job. Sean, I'm sensing that you disagree.
No. I agree. I just said, damn you, Prue Baker.
Oh no. But are you saying false for this? Or true?
I mean, I was gonna go with false, but then Prue said her quotes that backed herself up, so now I'm like, oh, that's obviously true because there is joy there. I would say false for Longest Memory though, because there's no joy in that book. It's very sad. I don't know. Even with bloody Lydia and Chapel, I don't know. It's fine. She can win this point.
The memories of the great granddaughter. I guess it's not actual real memories because she didn't actually experience it. But her dream of going to Africa and kissing the ground and connecting that way.
That's a bit of a stretch.
Is it? Okay. More than a stretch of my memory of Chapel and Lydia.
Yeah, interesting. See, I was feeling like this would be like my first instinct when I read this is like false. Like it's mainly for The Longest Memory because I'm like, I don't think that book offers much like happiness for the characters.
Virtually none.
Yeah, but this just goes to show, guys, as long as you can justify what you're saying with proof, with evidence, no one can argue with you. So Prue gets that point. Yeah. The joy of English. All right, moving on. That's
what we should rename our podcast. The joy of English.
I don't mind it. Maybe for season 2.
Yeah.
All right, my next.
The kids listening are like, season 2. Oh.
Probably if they're listening.
Yeah. True.
Hello to our one listening island.
Go.
All right. So, statement number 2. Both texts depict hope as something that is integral to survival for oppressed individuals.
I'm going to say false. Prue false.
Why?
Oh, I thought I'd gone again then. That was a huge silence.
Yeah, I think it's Sean. No, Sean is there.
I'm here. I'm just listening.
Okay, I'm going to say false because in The Longest, I think my only justification because in The Longest Memory, the characters that seem to have hope, their hopes are like destroyed.
Ooh.
Because Chapel and Lydia seem, they have this dream of going to the northern part of America, but it doesn't happen, and then their lives are like, and then there's this huge tragedy relating to Chapel. So he had hope, and then that's the result. Like that's what happened to him, and then Whitechapel never had hope, but still lived in his life of misery. So yeah, that's my answer.
Can you repeat the question now?
So both texts depict hope as something that is integral to survival for oppressed individuals.
Shan, true. Seven Stages of Grieving, the Aboriginal woman at the end, she talks about how they're marching across the bridge and how, they hope for change and all that sort of stuff, and they hope that everything will change and they can't go back. And that's technically, I would say that that's presented in a positive light, so showing that they do, like, obviously have, like, that want for survival and, making, a better life for Aboriginal / Indigenous Australians better, like, in the future. So she's, like, kind of full of all that hope. Like, she's not really, like, battered down by at that section of the play, she's not really battered down by, like, everything that's happened. And then I would say that hope is also shown in, like, Longest Memory through Lydia, although I know that obviously her dreams get dashed because Chapel is murdered. Spoiler alert. But also, I don't know, and this is probably a stretch here, but, like, Mr. Whitechapel, like, he wants things to change for the future, but he doesn't know how they will, but that he still hopes for better and, like, in the future. Does that make sense?
But he doesn't do anything. Like, I feel like we see these glimpses of hope, but it doesn't, nothing.
And would you say too that those hopes that they have is integral to their survival?
I think it helps keep Mr. White. I think it helps keeps
I don't
Mr.
see it.
Whitechapel.
It's not integral at all. They'll survive.
Prue, I hate you. Fine. I don't know. I feel like, like Mr. Whitechapel, I don't know, it helps him survive because I said so.
Look, in the interest of keeping things interesting for the final question,
God, yes.
I will award it to Shan.
Yes!
Absolutely rigged.
But I don't really
I bought this Audi for nothing.
All right.
I won.
Well, not yet. So, final question.
Yep, hit me.
The tiebreaker.
Oh, God.
Both texts suggest that culture is a key aspect of an individual's sense of identity and belonging.
True.
Frick!
Why?
Well, I feel like we see in Seven Stages this grief and grieving the loss of culture. And I think she ties that culture as, like, I feel like it's all like little bundle thing of, like, culture includes in Seven Stages, like, the language, the family connect, like the community, and connection to country, tradition, that sort of stuff. And I feel like that's, like, I can't explain it, but that's, like, who she is. And I think she talks about that so much. And I think her grief from losing some of that is palpable and shown a lot in the play. Does that make sense? Have I explained that terribly?
No, I think it works. Yeah. So, like,
Okay.
yeah. No.
And then I think in The Longest Memory, we see very little, like, the characters who are enslaved in The Longest Memory, we see very little, like, individual culture because of the, like, enslavement, because they're, enslaved. And then, like, we just don't see much identity. Like, we can differentiate between the characters, but we can't actually see this culture that's, like, explored in this. Like, they don't have a culture. I can't explain. But I think they've lost their sense of identity because their culture was like
Taken away
they
from them.
taken away from them. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, taken away from them. Their identity is like they don't even have their own names. They wouldn't be speaking their own language, or African language, the language that Whitechapel would have spoken in Africa. They're all speaking English, the language of their oppressors and their enslavers. So I don't think they don't have their own identity. They're not allowed to practice their own identity, or they're not able to because of they're extremely oppressed. So, or then they don't. There's anyway. Do you want to see what I mean?
Yeah, no.
I can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I exhausted myself from my excellent analysis of the first two. Yeah.
Whatever.
I'm gonna stop. Finn. That's it. That's my answer over.
Yeah. I feel like Prue wins.
Thank you.
You don't have anything to add, Sean?
I have nothing.
Okay. Well,
you just let me stumble through that. Thank you.
Absolutely. And now we have a recorded version of that. So every time I make fun of you, I'll just bring this podcast up and be like, well,
terrible.
There you go.
My teaching license might be renewed.
Oh God. Oh, thanks for reminding me too.
All right. Well, that I guess Prue's our winner. You have my approval, Prue, which you already had because you own an Uddy and you're a good person.
Thank you. I wasn't worried.
Yeah.
Are you guys suggesting that I am not a good person?
Well, no, that's not what was said. But anyway,
that's what I've inferred. Whatever.
All right. Well, yeah, that wraps up episode 7, guys. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an interesting one. Probably not our best, so sorry if you are still with us. Next week will be our last episode in the series on the longest memory and the 7 stages of grieving, and we're basically just going to be going over like how to address like different essay prompts and stuff like that to help our students with their essay writing. So if you are interested in that, make sure you listen, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye. See you. Bye.
Bye.